I want to recapture last Sunday. Reverend Galen's away today, and you might recall if you were here that I think the t-shirts are already being printed, but she called us to be Trinity agents of transformation. And we've been working since Advent into this Epiphany season, Brené Brown's amazing book, Gifts of Imperfection. So, of course, last week I was quite moved when Galen had spoken about, I think of her as the most creative soul imaginable, and to think that she went off to university imagining to be an artist, and in her experience of judgment and exclusion, and whether it was the teachers or the classmates, she basically put her art away. But thanks be to God, it blossomed again, and she's one of the most creative people I know. And she challenged us last week on our creativity. Brené Brown challenges this week on the addiction that each of us often have in this world to produce, to be human doings, to particularly in a consumeristic society to just try to either buy more, produce more, and that something like this, say worship, being with God, for many people is just like a waste of time. But Brené Brown says wasting our time to be playful, which in many ways, I don't know if you've ever thought about that, worship being playful, is a very powerful gift. I thought about this past week of how came through Trinity, and there's the serious badminton players. There's Ken in the back there, and Linda playing badminton with a bunch of, I see you guys. We got the volleyball players, on Monday night. Where's Lutz? He's up there, and a bunch of them. Now we got the pickleball, Gwen's pickleball, and the card players on Wednesday here. Those sunshine, that's serious bridge and serious euchre going on. Is there something else I'm missing out? Of course, there's the singing. I think you think of that as playfulness. Yeah? It's playful. Yeah. It's a gift to find that in our lives, to be playful. And I hear it from my kids. I heard it on sabbatical. Dad, when you're actually playful and just more relaxed, we really enjoy you a lot more. You're not quite as intense. Which I need to hear often. But here's where I want to tie this into the Gospel of Mark today, and a favorite reading of mine. So when Jesus calls the disciples in Mark, notice what's absent. Carolyn Lewis, who's a phenomenal preacher, she says this: notice there's no individualism, no being left on your own, no pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, no, you can handle this up, buckle up, buttercup. No, not even Jesus saying, follow me and good luck, you're on your own. Notice Jesus, he calls them together, not separately. Andrew and Simon, then James and John. Discipleship is not meant to be on its own. God knows, Jesus knows, we can't do this discipleship journey on our own. We cannot do life on our own. We cannot live into our vocations, our callings, our truth on our own. We need each other. I can tell you about a moment of incredible aloneness for me. I was in 1988 ordained as a new young minister. 25, the world was so excited. I still remember the caravan. We drove across Canada. We dropped some off in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and these were friends, classmates from Emmanuel College. I was going to Alberta on the Yellowhead Highway. Town of 500 people. And my introduction in 88, all the news of the decision of the United Church of Canada was trickling out, and I still remember my chair of the board. He was driving the tractor. He was actually a grader. He was grading the roads, mostly gravel roads out in Alberta. He got down. He was the nicest gentleman in the road. He stuck his hand out, warm welcome. He goes, welcome, Reverend John. Really glad to meet you, and I resign. We're not having any gays in our church, was his comment. And then not long afterwards, one of my favorites, I loved him so dearly. He had a cowboy hat on. And he got even worse. It was like, cowboy, like this gay stuff, we gotta take care of it. and he meant business. And it was really, wow, did I ever feel alone? What the folks hadn't realized is, I'd wrestled with my own father around the issue. My dad had, he was really just perplexed about the whole gay issue. And lo and behold, my roommate at Emmanuel College was gay, and we became like best friends. And so as we got to know it, he became a minister. And my dad liked him, but my dad just wasn't so sure what to make of this. And so I was dealing with that on the family front, and then I go out to this church and like going, oh my Lord, where do I go? Like it was kind of a stressful time. And I think at the time, I look back in '88, alone in Christ. Sometimes, we seek out people that will support us in those toughest times, and there were people, and they're mentors. And so what I want to say to you this morning, that on this journey of life, we need mentors. And I had mentors, it wasn't the Wi-Fi world of today, but there were people that were writing me letters and encouraging me in ministry when I didn't know quite what to do, and people were like going, I'm leaving this church. We need people to take risks in our lives. We need people to be courageous. We need people, as they did at the Globe and Awards the other night, wear black. We need people to step up and tell their me too. We need stories that are truthful in an age of exaggeration and ultimate lies. So sometimes we can feel quite alone. But I want to give you some hope today, because one thing I found about living in Alberta, and Albertans all know this, you'll drive 3 or 4 hours and think nothing of it just to be with a friend. And that's what I often did. And I still remember I was dating Nancy. She's back here in Ontario. And you got to know my personality back in '88. Like, I'm picking up hitchhikers when I drive 3 hours. And she's like, oh, no, you're not doing that. Oh, yes, I am. And again, met some amazing Indigenous people and hearing their stories. I'm living at that time on the Yellowhead Highway. And, so I look back at '88, how hard it was, but it was also a time that I grew so deeply in my faith, in my realization, you can't do ministry alone. So I want to conclude with 2 powerful stories. My kids, I've never been a huge Netflix fan. I haven't been, but now my kids have got me into something, and they did it over the holidays. They got me into something called This Is Us. So some of you have followed This Is Us. So I guess it's on CTV now, and I'm in season 1, so I don't want to spoil anything for you, but, I watched the other night, I cried through most of, I heard one friend, actually Brad Inglis, minister up to Tobermory, Brad says to me, it's 1 episode a night. I watched like 4, and I'm like crying and laughing, and so the moment of truth for me was for Kevin, and Kevin is this brilliant, he's almost like a genius. He's made so much money, and he discovers his biological father. It's incredible, the love that happens in a short period of time. A father, though, that, unlike himself, had wrestled with drugs, a father that was a poet, but most of all, this father was human. And in the midst of facing a father that was dying of cancer, and Kevin, who he'd been on top of the world, kind of had the ideal family, an African-American that just, he was living the life of some of the big corporate people, I would imagine, in New York. And all of a sudden, he has his breakdown. His dad's dying. Life is turned upside down. And then something really quite beautiful happens in that alone moment. He realizes that it's quite profound. The postman shows up at the door, and his dad has died. And Kevin, the son, is in disbelief. The postman starts to cry. And he didn't even know this postman all these years. He said, your father, William, was a very special man. Jettison forward, He walks in to the corporate company that had sent him a bereavement card that looked like just stamped from the team. It was like so impersonal. He goes in, they're used to working 20-hour days. It's a corporate table. They're all trying to crunch the numbers. He walks in and he's like the savior of the company. And he looks at them and he basically says, "Thank you for your support for me at some level." But he said, "I'm done." And they're like, "You can't just quit. What are you going to do?" And he smiles with the biggest grin on his face. "I think I'm going to spend more time with my kids. I think I'm going to talk to the postman more. I'm going to learn," I think he's saying, "to play and to realize that relationships is what matters the most." So I'm going to conclude with this. Brought a little something forward. About a year ago, there's some friends here that were on the Holy Land trip with me. Sandra and Terry remember this. We were down at the Sea of Galilee, and I got to know a couple of these beautiful women that I won't even say a denomination, but they're from a different denomination, and they'd never been baptized. And one of them looked at me and said, "The sun's going down, the Sea of Galilee," and they said, "We want to be baptized." They had been Christians since they were a child, and they had been faithful to their church. They lived and breathed Christ. Their relationship was so close to their Lord, their God. And then one of the women looked at me and she said, "The church that I loved all these years, as soon as my son came out of the closet in his 20s, the church I loved shunned me. They said that my son wasn't welcome." She goes, "I don't go to that church anymore." She had found her way to a United Church, actually, but she was in her 70s. Most of her life had been in another denomination, and she had been so faithful. And with tears in her eyes, she said, "Would you baptize me?" So we got into here's a little Galilee water right here. It wasn't the Jordan, we were in the Galilee. And I baptized her, and I say this to all of you, and this is for every single child, every single human being. You are a beloved child of God. You are a beloved child of God, and God is well pleased with you. Let's be playful about that and share that joyfully with each other. Thanks be to God. Amen.